In this video you will discover the leader of the Illuminati. On October 2014 I released the video Who is the leader of the Illuminati at Lions Ground, and this video is still going viral today and is on top on YouTube and on top of search engines because the modern people wants to know who is or who are controlling their lives. But I was not satisfied with my research. My intuition triggered me to start over and deeper. And because the system we call the pyramid of the Illuminati is so complex and so misunderstood, because the information has been neglected throughout the years. But I can tell you one thing, nothing, really nothing is what it seems. What you read on the internet, what you see on YouTube or even Wikipedia, it's absolutely deceptive, baloney. They have tweaked our history so we live different today. It's like going back in time and give the soldiers the knowledge how to make automatic rifles just to have future benefits, changing the future, changing the way we think. I have met and I have talked privately with acquaintances, with business partners, and someone very close. And for security reasons, I can't tell you if this person was a family member or a business partner, or maybe both, of Jacob Rothschild. And you may wonder, how did I pull this off? How did I did it? Well, I am Dutch, as you can hear, and I lived in a country where Prince Bernhard was married with the former Queen of the Netherlands, Queen Beatrix, and I am a friend of a Bernhard family member. It took me a lot of effort, I can tell you that. I have been chased, and they have tried to sabotage me and do my research. I even received several death threats. Yes. Therefore, stop studying the history of the Illuminati. It only gives you little added value. Just look, listen, learn, and read what is happening today. That's my advice. If you examine it, what's going on today, what you collect each day, then you really see who is in charge. I want you to become an enlightened person after seeing this video and pass your knowledge to others. You have heard the saying, when you have money, you have the power. And you may think that no one's looked at this before because ownership networks, and I'm talking about market, money, stocks, ownership networks are really, really boring to study. And well, as ownership is related to control, as I shall explain later, looking at ownership networks actually can give you answers to questions like, who are the key players? How are they organized? And are they isolated? Are they interconnected? And what is the overall distribution of control? In other words, who controls the world? Look, when the crisis came, the serious limitation of existing economic and financial models immediately became apparent. There is also a strong belief, which I share, that bad or overly simplistic and overconfident economics helped create the crisis. And now you've probably all heard of a similar criticism coming from people who are skeptic of capitalism. But this is different. This is coming from the heart of finance. The first quote is from Jean-Claude Trichet when he was governor of the European Central Bank. And the second quote from the head of the UK Financial Services Authority. Are these people implying that we don't understand the economic systems that drive our modern societies? Well, it gets worse. We spend billions of dollars trying to understand the origins of the universe. Well, we still don't understand the conditions for a stable society, a functioning economy, or peace. What is happening here? And how can this be possible? And do we really understand more about the fabric of reality than we do about the fabric which emerges from our human interactions? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. But there's an intriguing solution which is coming from what is known as the science of complexity. To explain what this means and what this thing is, please let me quickly take a couple of steps back. I ended up in physics by accident. It was a random encounter when I was young, and since then I often wondered about the amazing success of physics in describing the reality we wake up in every day. In a nutshell, you can think of physics as follows. You can take a chunk of reality you want to understand and you translate it into mathematics, and you encode it into equations. Then predictions can be made and tested. We are actually really lucky that this works, because no one really knows why the thoughts in our heads should actually relate to the fundamental workings of the universe. Despite the success, physics has its limits. As Dirk Hebbeling pointed out in the last quote, we don't really understand the complexity that relates to us, that surrounds us. This paradox is what got me interested in complex systems. So these are systems which are made up of many interconnected, of interacting parts. Swarm of birds or fish, ant colonies, ecosystems, brains, financial markets. These are just a few examples. Interestingly, complex systems are very hard to map into the mathematical equations. The usual physics approach doesn't really work here. So, what do we know about the complex systems? Well, it turns out that what looks like complex behavior from the outside is actually the result of a few simple rules of interaction. And this means you can forget about the equations and just start to understand the system by looking at the interactions. Yeah? So you can actually forget about the equations and you just start to look at the interactions. And it gets even better, because most complex systems have this amazing property called emergence. So this means that the system as a whole suddenly starts to show a behavior which cannot be understood or predicted by looking at the components of the system. No. So the whole is literally more than the sum of its parts. And all of this also means that you can forget about the individual parts of the system, how complex they are. So, if it's a cell of a termite or a bird, you just focus on the rules of interaction. As a result, networks are ideal representations of complex systems. The nodes in the network are the system's components, and the links are given by the interactions. So, what equations are for physics, complex networks are the study of complex systems. This approach has been very successfully applied to many complex systems in physics, biology, computer science, the social science. But what about economics? Where are economic networks? This is a surprising and prominent gap in the literature. The study I published last year called "Who is the Leader of the Illuminati" was the first extensive analysis of the economic networks, and the study went viral on the internet and it attracts a lot of attention from the international media. But this is quite remarkable because, again, why did no one look at this before? Similar data has been around for quite some time. So what I looked at in detail was ownership networks. So here the nodes are companies, people, governments, foundations, etc., etc. And the links represents the shareholding relations. So shareholder A, for example, has X% of the shares in company B. And we also assign a value to the company given by the operating revenue. So ownership networks reveal the pattern of shareholding relations. And in this example you can see a few financial institutions with some of the many links highlighted. And now you may think that no one's looked at this before because ownership networks are really boring to study. Well, as ownership is related to control, and looking at the ownership networks actually can give you answers to questions like who are the key players, and in other words, who controls the world. And I think this is an interesting question, who controls the world. And it has its implications for systemic risk. This is a measure how vulnerable a system is overall. A high degree of interconnectivity can be bad for stability, because then the stress can spread through the system like an epidemic. Scientists have sometimes criticized economists who believe ideas and concepts are more important than empirical data, because a foundational guideline in science is let the data speak. Okay, let's do that. So I started with a database containing 13 million ownership relations from 2007, and this is a lot of data, and because I wanted to find out who rules the world, I decided to focus on transnational corporations, or TNCs for short, and these are companies that operate in more than one country. And I found 43,000. In the next step I built the network around these companies. So I took all the TNC shareholders and the shareholders etc. all the way upstream, and I did the same downstream, and ended up with a network containing 600,000 nodes and 1 million links. This is the TNC network which I analyzed. And it turns out to be the structure as follows. So you have a periphery and a center which contains about 75 of all the players. And in the center there is this tiny but dominant core which is made up of highly interconnected companies. And to give you a better picture, think about a metropolitan area. So you have the suburbs and the periphery, and you have a center like a financial district. Then the core will be something like the tallest high-rise building in the center. And I already see signs of organizations going on there. 36% of the TNCs are in the core only, but they make up 95% of the total operation revenue of all TNCs. So now I analyze the structure. So how does this relate to the control? Well, ownership gives voting rights to shareholders. This is the normal notion of control, and there are different models which allow you to compute the control you get from ownership. If you have more than 50% of the shares in a company, you get control. But usually it depends on the relative distribution of shares. And the network really matters. About 10 years ago, Mr. Tronchetti Provera had ownership and control in a small company, which had ownership and control in a bigger company. You get the idea, right? This ended up giving him control in the Telecom Italia, which leverage of 26. So this means that with each euro he invested, he was able to move 20 euros of market value through the chain of ownership relationships. Now, what I actually computed in my study was the control over the TNC's value. This allowed me to assign a degree of influence to each shareholder, and this is very much in the sense of Max Weber's idea of potential power, which is the probability of imposing one's own will despite the opposition of others. If you want to compute the flow in an ownership network, this is what you have to do. It's actually not that hard to understand, and let me explain by giving you this analogy. So you think about water flowing in pipes, and where the pipes have different thickness. So similarly, the control is flowing in the ownership networks and is accumulating at the nodes. So what did I find after computing all this network control? Well, it turns out that the 737 top shareholders have the potential to collectively control 80% of the TNC's value. Now remember, I started out with 600,000 nodes. So these 737 top players make up a bit more than 0.1%. And they are mostly financial institutions in the US and the UK. And it gives even more extreme. There are about 146 top players in the core, and they together have the potential to collectively control 40% of the TNC's value. The high degree of control you saw is extreme by any standard. The high degree of the interconnectivity of the top players in the core could pose a significant systemic risk to the global economy, and we could easily reproduce the TNC network with a few simple rules. And this means that its structure is probably the result of self-organization. It's an emergent property which depends on the rules of interaction in the system. So it's probably not the result of a top-down approach like a global conspiracy, the triangle of the Illuminati. So my study is just an impression of the moon's surface. It's absolutely not a street map, and you should take the exact numbers in my study with a grain of salt. Yet I gave my tantalizing glimpse of a brave new world of finance, and I hope to have opened the door for much such research in this direction. So the remaining unknown terrain will be charted in the future, and this is slowly starting. and we are seeing the emergence of long-term and highly funded programs which aim at understanding our networked world from a complexity point of view. But this journey has only just begun, so we will have to wait before we see the first results. Now, there's still a big problem, in my opinion. Ideas relating to finance, economics, politics, society are very often tainted by people's personal ideologies, and I really hope that this complexity perspective allows for some common ground to be found. It will be really great if it has the power to help end the gridlock created by the conflicting ideas, which appears to be paralyzing our globalized world. Reality is so complex, we need to move away from the dogma. And when you see the structure, you are awake from awakened or enlightened. So the multi-million-dollar question is, who is the leader of the Illuminati? It is not who is the leader of the Illuminati, it is who are the leaders of the Illuminati. The leaders of the world that controls everything. The leaders of the Illuminati are the Rothschild family and the Rockefeller family. And this is confirmed by the close contact person of Jacob Rothschild, who showed me the original family tree of the Rothschild and the connections. I never ever have seen a family tree that goes beyond mankind. They are absolutely the oldest. They are one of the first bloodlines that walked on earth, meaning our existing of human mankind is not correct. It's baloney, it's made up. And according to his story, mankind has been helped, is still being helped, is educated, and is still educated by extraterrestrial life form. The Bilderberg, the United Nations, Europe, United States, go on. Just everything what walks on Earth is nothing more than a simple chess piece. Chess, you play on a chessboard. A chessboard is Masonic, Freemasonry. The Rothschilds family are not trillionaires, no. They are multi-trillionaires. And if you still think the Illuminati is eradicated, think again. They were a secret society before they were discovered, before they were banned and flee. So what prevents the Illuminati doing this again? Today they are supreme, and that's the difference between then and now. I want to read your thoughts in the comment section. For detailed information, read the article, link is below. If you are new here, hit the red subscribe button underneath this video to make sure you never miss the alternative news. I appreciate also a lot if you share this video. Now, I'm Heathcliff, your host, Alliance Ground News,